name is Britt Burt. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the power industry in the United States and Canada. Specifically, I want to focus on the new build sector of the power industry in terms of new generation that's being constructed or being planned for the future. Before I start talking about the new build activity, I would like to talk a little bit about one of the key driving factors behind new build capacity. And of course, that's been the closures. I've mentioned this before, but this gives you a different view of this. And so since the year 2010, we have seen about 85 gigawatts in the United States and Canada close, and focusing just on the fossil units as well as the nuclear units. This doesn't include the hydros and things of that nature that have closed. But 85 gigawatts, most of that being coal, about 50 gigawatts. And so not all of that has been coal, but the vast majority of that has been. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. In fact, from now between the end of 2020, I'm tracking about 27 additional gigawatts of coal-fired capacity that is scheduled for closure, as well as 10 gigawatts of nuclear capacity. And there are some others as well. There's some of the older natural gas-fired plants and oil-fired plants that are scheduled for closure during this time frame. And these are the key drivers behind the new build activity that's taking place, because demand is really staying flat at the moment. When I speak of new build, I'm speaking about new plants. We refer to them as grassroots plants. Some people refer to them as greenfields, as well as brownfield sites and unit additions to existing plants. Now here we see high probability projects, about 300, over almost 400 projects, valued at over $100 billion that are scheduled for construction kickoff between now and the end of 2020. And this, of course, is of a much larger pipeline of projects that we're tracking, about $300 billion when we look at the whole picture. But of course, we see a lot of projects that are delayed or canceled for various reasons as we move forward. And I think that number that 386 number could go either way. It could increase a little bit or maybe decrease due to cancellations. But healthy spending in the new build sector, some to meet some tightening reserve margins in places like Texas and Florida and parts of the Northeast, but a lot of activity being built to replace capacity that's being closed. Now, one of the key areas where we see new build taking place, of course, is with wind energy, development of wind energy. In fact, wind is supplying about 10% of our electricity nowadays, and there's some very aggressive plans to increase this to 20% and even to 30% of our electricity going forward. Most of this activity is being driven by the extensions to the renewable tax credits, and that's driving a lot of this activity, but also renewable energy portfolio continuations in places like California and parts of the Northeast and Illinois are really driving wind forward aggressively. And I think maybe 8 to 10 gigawatts would kick off construction over the next few years. Some of the more aggressive projections say that by the year 2020, we'll see 75 gigawatts of wind capacity moving forward. And I think that's a little bit aggressive in terms of projections. We're tracking about 64 gigawatts that could kick off construction between now and the end of 2020. I think a lot of that depends on what happens with the Clean Power Plan that was stayed by the Supreme Court last year. At the end of the day, right now I'm tracking about 119 projects and $40 billion that are high probability projects. We are confident we'll move forward during the time period specified. And of course, again, that number could go up or down depending on market conditions. Another area in the renewable sector that we have seen aggressive growth for the past few years has been in the solar area, and predominantly from photovoltaic installations. In fact, last year we saw 9 gigawatts as compared to 3 gigawatts the year before. There are projections that say solar that will provide about 1% of our electricity. I believe a lot of this depends on what happens with the Clean Power Plan as well. There are areas where solar is outpacing the ability to support it from the T&D sector with the transmission lines and so forth. So we have seen a little bit of a downturn, but I think moving forward in places like Texas, Florida, even in the mid-Atlantic regions like North Carolina and Virginia, we're seeing growth there. And California has been healthy. Of course, Nevada and Arizona have always been healthy areas for development of new solar capacity. And I think it'll remain that way moving forward. So at the moment, we're tracking 127 projects valued at about $13 billion. That have a high probability chance of moving forward over the next 3 or 4 years. That of course is of a much larger project pipeline valued at about $27 billion. When we talk about replacement capacity for some of the larger base load units and intermediate load units, we have to talk about natural gas because of the cost of natural gas. Long-range projections expect natural gas to stay in the $4 to $6 per million BTU range for the next several years, and so it's becoming more the fuel of choice and the predominant fuel of choice for the power industry. In fact, we see natural gas supplying about 32% of our electricity as we speak. And I expect this to remain very healthy. A lot of it is being built to replace capacity that's been retired, but there are areas where we're seeing tightening reserve margins and load growth as well, Texas being one of those regions, Florida another one, parts of the Northeast and New England, and certainly growth in California as well. And then, of course, parts of Western Canada where they have good access to natural gas. And if you see the map there, you see almost every state and province has some shade of coloration representing activity. So it's really everywhere. Projections say that between now and 2038, we would see natural gas-fired capacity grow at about 3% per year moving forward. Now, those are some long-range projections, but if all of that did take place, it would represent 340 gigawatts of natural gas-fired generation moving forward. And then, of course, not only the base load and intermediate load, we see a lot of this being peak load capacity to support some of the renewable energy projects that we see, and also installations inside some of the industrial energy producers where places like refineries and chemical plants and other heavy industrial sites are choosing to generate their own electricity from a captive basis. At the moment, we're tracking about 34 gigawatts of natural gas-fired capacity that's under construction, and I see that market staying quite healthy over the next few years to come. With that being said, I would like to thank you for joining me today. In closing, I've listed a couple of our industrial outlooks that we have coming up later this year. These are outlooks where we talk about all industries, not just power. We have panel discussions relating to the industrial world and all the key industries. And then, of course, upcoming webinars for the power industry, South Asia, and a global power webinar coming up in June. I would like to invite you to attend those and join us. Please go to our website at www.industrialinfo.com for more information on those. Thank you, and have a pleasant day.